Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to week 2 of summer camp. Thanks for joining me. Got a slightly smaller crew today from what it's looking like. I know that we're competing with the AHEAD conference today. It's the week after the long weekend, so I'm sure people are on vacation. But for those of you who are here, excited to have you. We've got a lot of stuff to go over today. Before we get going, just a couple pieces of business. If you didn't join us last week, I'll just introduce myself again. My name is Rachel Cruzel. I'm a territory sales director here at Text Help. I support higher ed in a 5-state area around Minnesota, which is where I'm from. K-12 in the state of Minnesota. More importantly, though, is I spent the last 10 years as an assistive technology specialist at 2 colleges and universities in Minnesota. So I know AT well, I know textile products well, I know implementation well, and kind of practical uses with your students. So couple housekeeping items today. As always, you guys are all on mute. If you do have a question, please throw it into the questions area. I'll be checking it throughout the day today. I'll also have some time at the end as well. Second, I will make sure to get a recording of the webinar out to you all as well, either later today or sometime tomorrow so that you can view it. And this is important because I did send out an email late last night with the slide deck. If you didn't get the deck, I'll send it out again with the recording and any resources that we get together. But when I was pulling this webinar together, so much of my day-to-day work was around implementation with students, like I said. You know, how do we actually use this with students? How do we get students to want to use the tools? And when I pulled this together, an hour just wasn't enough time. And so instead of cutting content, stuff that I hear people talk about all the time in my new role and my old role, I made an executive decision to make this an hour-and-a-half session. If you didn't know that, I apologize. Stick around for as long as you can. I'm going to record it, whether or not anyone sticks around to the very end, but you'll have the recording to watch later today, next week, in a month, whenever it is that works best for you to call on these resources, to call on these strategies with students. So again, I apologize for making the executive decision and extending it longer. If you can or want to stick around, love to have you. If you can't, you'll have the recording again for next week, next month, whenever it is. So I promise I'll keep the rest within an hour, but reading and studying is just so much of the guts of what we do that it was hard to cut, like I said. So that being said, what are we going to talk about today? We are going to talk about when and how does the tool read, first and foremost. Second, we're going to talk about the study skills tools, and then really kind of the guts of our session is going to be practical strategies for students. And then very briefly at the end, we're going to talk about exams, proctoring, and online browsers, things like that, okay? That being said, I just checked the questions. It sounds like everyone can hear me okay now. That was my delay, was just seeing that someone said, I can't hear you, and sounds like you guys can. So, and you should be able to see my screen. So let's get moving. All right, let's get digging in today. So where and how does our program read? Okay. Now, a couple things before we get going. This PowerPoint, I am going to kind of get rid of once we get moving here today. I'm going to jump in and out of it here and there, but I want you to see this as more kind of a guide. When I pulled this together, I actually talked with my colleague Kimberly. She does all of our professional development. She's great and she's fabulous. But she's saying one of the things to think about is the when, where, and why of our tools. When might it be useful for a student to use it? Why might they want to use it? And then where does it work? And while our platforms are super similar, we talked about platforms last week, is it on the desktop? Are you within Google? There are some slight differences between the different tools, and some of that has to do with kind of how those environments work in. So what I've done is when we talk about these tools, I'm going to, on each slide, have when it might be useful, why, and then where, so that you've got it kind of in front of you in one place to kind of know. Now, I'm not going to go word for word through these slides. I'm not going to call out any place that it works. Instead, we're going to get just some kind of global perspective of where it works, where, why, etc. And so the two takeaways for today, first and foremost, this applicability of the tools across platform. What I'm going to show you today is that our tool is going to read all these different places. And while the tool you might use might look a little different between the different platforms, know that they're there in some combination, and you should be able to read kind of everything anywhere, given kind of our four main reading tools, and then the support tools kind of underneath it. So when you go to different places, just look for where it is. Look for those tools, those reading tools that we're going to talk about, and remember back, okay, this is how we do it, and it should work. Okay. The second piece is that when we work with students, we always tell them, go back and study, go back and actually practice. And so I'm giving you permission to play this week and next week. We're off next week. We took a little break. Part of that was scheduling. Part of it is just because I wanted you to guys have time to play and actually try the tools, try some of these strategies so that it kind of sticks. We can't have students learn things without them actually practicing, rehearsing, things like that. Same with you all. I'd like you to go and try these tools. Make sure it's downloaded if you haven't done that, but then also say, hey, how do I do this? Where's this reading button? I'm going to try this study strategy. Okay. So that being said, I'm going to start jumping into the actual how do we read this content and what are the study skills. This is going to take us for about another 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll get going into the actual strategies. But I want to make sure that you guys have a basis of how it is that these tools work. Okay, so I'm going to leave the PowerPoint right now. One thing I forgot to mention at the beginning, because I was in the PowerPoint here before I hop into our actual demos and showing you, is I'm going to send you these weekly emails with the information, but I realized that keeping 7 emails together might be challenging with all of the resources. So I created this new document just before we started here. It's going to have each week and all the resources linked in there. So watch for that today too. So save this, you'll have it coming. So when you see this in the email, here it is, okay? So let's get started here, okay? This is a PDF. This is what kind of runs disability resources when we're talking about students getting access to reading content. It's what the publishers have sent us for many, 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 many years is PDFs, okay? To read a PDF, students can have it on the desktop, they can put it in their Google Drive, they can put it in their Office 365, OneDrive, it doesn't matter, wherever they kind of prefer to work. The keys though is that it's going to read in a couple of different ways. First and foremost, a student can simply click and highlight the text that they want read and have it read out loud. So if a student wants this paragraph read, for example, go ahead and click on that and then click the play button.
Introduction to Sociology. We all belong to many groups. You're a member of your sociology class.
Okay, so that's one way to read. Anywhere you see this play button, you can click and highlight the text, click the play button, and it will play out loud for you. Okay. The other way within the PDF reader that you can get it to read is this click to speak option, okay? Right now it's not on. If I wanted to turn it on, I would simply click it and I would get this kind of purple line underneath it when I float away from the tool. It literally allows you to click and it will speak.
Introduction to Sociology. We all belong.
Okay, I could click here and it will start at the beginning of the sentence or area that I want it to read.
Why might people of a single group exhibit different behaviors in the same situation?
Okay, to turn click to speak off, I simply unclick it and I can now click in my document without it reading out loud. Okay, those are the two main ways to read in a PDF file. Now the reason click to speak grays out all of our other options here is because if we click, we can't have it use the highlighter because it's clicking to speak. So that's why it gets grayed out. As soon as you unclick it, it comes back for everything, okay? I mentioned PDF textbooks. This is the same if a faculty member is doing any type of reading. If you have exams that you need to give to students, students can have them as a PDF file and have it read out loud. Journal articles, I mean, the sky's the limit. Any kind of PDF that a student could need, it can be read in our tool, okay? We're going to talk about inaccessible PDFs in a little bit, but know that this is the main ways that you're reading a PDF file, okay? And I'm going to hop over in Robin is asking, what about reading continuously without highlighting the text? That's a great question, Robin. There are features within the options area where you can choose if you want it to continuously read or have it read only so much at a time. Absolutely. There's also features where you can have it not highlight as well. Those are going to be in, again, the option settings area, which I can follow up with you on, have your rep follow up with you on to talk more about where, when, how, etc. But great question. All of that can be customized for sure. So the second major file type that's kind of come into our frame of reference are EPUB files. Publishers really like EPUB files. We're going to start seeing more and more of them as we move through time. And we did rebuild our EPUB reader within the last couple months. So know that this is a new updated version, okay? It's going to work really similar to the PDF reader. Students can have it on the desktop. They can have it in their Google Drive, Office 365, doesn't really matter. The key is that it's going to read very similar. Okay, we still have that same play button, so we can, click and highlight. Oops, click and highlight the text that we want read and then click the play button. But within the EPUB reader, we actually have a tool called hover speech. This tool, when I click on it, again, it's going to gray things out, but I simply have to hover my mouse over a word.
The first lesson in crime and criminality I remember was when I was in.
And it's going to read out loud instead. Okay, so instead of clicking to speech, you just hover and speak. Okay,
1.1 crime and.
Just like that. Turn it off, unclick it, and it won't speak when I hover. Okay, so between the PDF and EPUB, we've got our play button, hover, or click to speak. Okay, one of the questions I get from people is, when do you use each one? And I said, whatever a student is most comfortable with. If a student is okay clicking and highlighting the text they want read, the play button works great. If they're a student who can click easily, can kind of navigate their mouse and click, that can be really useful. If a student can hover their mouse, have them hover. Some students who have physical disabilities around fine motor skills find either the click to speak or the hover speech might work a little bit better. But know that there's options, there's variety. It's all going to read at the end of the day. And remember, like we talked about last week, you can go into those options and customize the speed and the rate and the voice, things like that. So make sure you go in and have students adjust that, okay? Now, in addition to the play button being both present in the EPUB reader, the PDF reader, it's also available in some other places that students are going to do work. And one of those places is Docs, whether it's Microsoft Word, Office 365, Google. I'm showing you the Google version. It can work the exact same way as both the PDF and the EPUB. Click and highlight, and then click the play button. Or within a Word document, you can just place your mouse wherever it is you want it to read and click the play button, and it will just continuously read out loud.
These changes can alter the course of a student's life, but also.
Okay. It also works in web pages. So I've got my Read&Write toolbar in Google floating here at the top. Click and highlight the text that I want read. Click the play button.
Patterns in Arctic weather and climate.
And the big one that a lot of people forget or don't realize or don't know that I mentioned last week a few times is our learning management system. So I've got Canvas here, but it should work in many, if not all of them. Again, click and highlight the text. It's going to play out loud for us.
As we talked about in class, different orders of operation.
Okay. The other catch though is when you're in a website, we also have our hover speech tool here. So remember how I said at the beginning, you kind of got to jump between like which toolbar am I using and where am I using it? Just look for these indicator tools, these icons of the tools. Where is it? Hover speech, hover over the word.
As we talked about in class, different orders of operation.
Okay. So you've got variety, you've got choice, but there's always some way to read in all of these different platforms. It's just a matter of figuring out where the tool is in which of the areas, okay? And while this seems complicated, students tend to catch on pretty fast. Again, once you do it a couple times, once you hop into it yourself, try it out, very quickly it becomes muscle memory. I just click the play button. I just use the hover speech, okay? We have a question. Let me take a peek. Brad is asking, are you using Google Chrome toolbar? I am using Google Chrome Toolbar, Brad. I'm just doing that because my slide deck is in here, so I don't have to pop between the desktop. If students are doing a lot of work online, I'd encourage you to have them install the Google Toolbar, which you can, again, like we talked about last week, even as a Microsoft school, have them log into. There is a way for online to be read with the desktop version. It's not as easy and flawless as this and doesn't have as many of the tools. So I would always have students use the Google version as a tool when they're using online content or really in the online content, either as a backup, or if they're using the desktop version as their primary, they can continue doing that for textbooks, but then have this if they're doing a lot of online work as well. And then Tori asked, does it read PDF files that are uploaded into Canvas? Tori, that's going to depend a little bit. For students that I worked with, if a PDF was uploaded into Canvas and it's kind of like an image that's rendered in the program, it might not read so great with either your hover speech or your play button because the browser and the program might not realize that there's text. They're going to think it's a picture. Instead, I would always encourage students to download the file either to their desktop if they're using the desktop version, or to plug it into their Google Drive, plug it into their Office 365, either one, and it's just going to read more flawlessly using the tools that we have. Okay, now the kind of catch that I'll show you in just a second is actually our screenshot reader that could potentially read it. So hold that thought for just a second and I'll show you that, but that's another way to kind of pinch hit, okay? And then Andrea asked, how do you find the tool for hover if it's not showing up in our toolbar? That's a good question, Andrea. I'm wondering if for some reason it got turned off in your options area. What I can do is if you go in there under kind of your general tools where you set everything up, it might not be kind of clicked in saying, hey, this is the right, we want this tool in our toolbar. That might be what's going on, but I can definitely follow up with you, make sure that it's all set up correctly, because it should be showing up if it's in, if you're using the Google version, okay? Good questions, everyone. Keep them coming. Okay. I mentioned hover speech, play button in LMSs in web pages, and Tori asked me, well, what about rendered in web pages? What if we have a PDF? What if I have an image of text, for example? Now, I am going to talk about our OCR conversion tool in a minute, so hold that thought if you're in your head going, wait a minute. But we do have this other tool. It's called the screenshot reader, and it's kind of our OCR on the fly tool. So if for some reason this was not reading, for some reason Canvas, the way that it was built, the way that the faculty did something, the way it was put in, it isn't reading with the hover speech, it's not reading with the play button, whatever it is, you can always use the screenshot reader tool, click and drag over the text you want read. It's going to optical character recognition on the fly,
Error, order of operations,
and then it will read out loud to the student. This can be an image, it can be on the desktop, literally anywhere that I can move my mouse on the computer screen and I can draw a box around it, it will read out loud. Now we added the play, pause, stop button. Play was there before, but pause and stop was recently added in the last couple weeks. So if you're seeing that and going, wait a minute, that's new, it's because it is. The other thing too that we added is this copy text button. So I can actually copy the text and put it somewhere if I want, okay? As I mentioned, really great for text-based images. LMS, for some reason, if it's not working, if something has been loaded into the LMS and a student can't get it out, like Tori mentioned, if a website for some reason, if this website wasn't reading, again, I can take that screenshot reader, click and drag over the text, and it will read out loud to me. The other thing it works with, which I'm going to talk a little bit more later, is this is a tool you can typically use with your AccuPlacer. So if you're an AccuPlacer school, this is a way to do it, and it's a way that many school universities and colleges use the tool to get the AccuPlacer read out loud for students, okay? So our four main tools, we've got our play button, our hover speech, our click to speak, and our screenshot reader. Between those four, we should be able to read pretty much any content on our computers for students. And these tools tend to follow us, desktop, Google, wherever we go. It's just sort of what mix of them we have, okay? Typically there's 2 or 3 of them wherever we go. It's just finding them, okay? So now that we know how to read, let's talk about some tools that are there to help support students when they read, okay? First and foremost, we have a dictionary, and we also have a picture dictionary. Now, while the picture dictionary may not be super useful kind of on a daily, weekly, monthly basis for our higher ed students, there's some really great ways that we can use it when we're doing studying later on, which I'll show you. But for our ELL, our English language learning students, this actually might be a really nice tool, especially if they're still learning the language, to help bridge that gap. So know that it's here. For students I work with who might be a student with disability in my old job and an English language learner, I would point this out to them. Not because I didn't think they were smart or capable, but having that visual image sometimes really helped flip that switch faster, and visual images can help things stick better. But for either of these two tools, I can simply click and highlight a word. Maybe I don't know what the word climate means. I can click on the dictionary button. It's going to give me the definition of the word climate, and then any of these play buttons next to this can be clicked on to read out loud.
Noun. Regular weather condition.
Okay. For the picture dictionary, same type of thing. Click on the word, highlight it. Oops, there we go. Picture dictionary, and it's going to give me a picture of what climate might be. Okay. Pretty straightforward tools, but I always like to point them out. Okay. This is true in websites, LMSs, your Word documents, PDFs, EPUBs, etc. They're all in there. Okay. Next tool I'm going to show you, again, it carries between these different platforms, is our audio maker tool. It's the little document with the headset on, like the one I'm wearing right now to talk to you all. Okay. How it works, pretty straightforward. I'm going to click and highlight text that I want read. It could be up to 20,000 characters, which equals about 7 pages of text, give or take. Okay. I simply click on the audio maker button. It's going to give me this little progress bar at the bottom. I only clicked on just a little sentence because I didn't want it to take too long. But what happens then is I get an automatically downloaded MP3 file of whatever I've clicked and highlighted to be able to listen to. So if you're an office that's used to making MP3s for students, have students do it themselves moving forward. They can do this and it takes a matter of seconds. Okay. On the go readings, on the go listening to textbooks. If students are getting that kind of visual fatigue from their computer right now, if students are struggling with maybe TBI, concussion, migraines right now, have them use this tool when things are getting tough on the computer, or maybe it's a heavy reading week, have them download it and listen to it. Okay. Now I'm going to show you later on what the desktop version of this tool looks like and how we can actually utilize it and do some creative things with it to help with studying, to help with recall, foreign language, things like that. The other thing that this could be used for is if a student were to ever need an exam read out loud to them and you don't necessarily want to have a peer do it, you could always have an audio created from the file that a faculty might give you of the exam and have it read out loud to a student that way. So another kind of method for having it read. Okay, and again, this is in our websites, it's within our documents. Okay. It's in a whole bunch of different places that we might be doing work. Okay. Not seeing any questions. I'm going to hop to our next study skills tool. Again, more for our English language learners. Okay. But what we do have within our tool is our translator. Okay. It's a single word translator. It's indicated by the arrows that are crossing one another. And I'm actually doing it with my arms right now as I'm sitting at my desk chatting with you all. But it's a single word translator that allows students, again, to get content in their native language to be able to help them understand the content. Couple of reasons we have a single word translator. One, Google has a really robust translator that can do paragraphs and pages. There's no sense in us reinventing the wheel as a sister kind of partner company to Google for us to do that. We just encourage students to go there. The bigger reason, though, is that when a student is learning another language or learning content in a language, we want to help bridge that gap between them learning in their native language versus what the content is that they are trying to learn and the language that's being taught in. And so we want to be able to have a scaffolded tool for students to be able to go back to get that context, to be able to continue working in the language that the assignment is in, the reading is in, things like that. So between the picture dictionary and the translator, this should hopefully help students. Much like any of the other tools, click and highlight the word, click on the button. It's going to bring up the dictionary or the translated word for education here, I have it sent to Spanish, and it's going to give me a variety of different words in Spanish that might mean, hey, this is the Spanish word for education. And the language that you translate into can be set based on the options area, those settings on the far right side that we talked about, okay? That can all be customized. French, German, Spanish, we've got a whole bunch of different languages in there. So know that you can go in there and change that. Last week I shared a resource that talked about different languages, voices, things like that. And I think I included it in this week's resource guide as well that I'm gonna send out. So know that if you want that list for students, there's a list coming to you, okay? I'm not gonna go through and list them all off today because we have such short time together. But in the PowerPoint, sorry, in the slide deck, there is the resource link. I have it actually sitting in front of me looking at my slide deck. It's there for you for sure, okay? All right, next one I'm going to talk about is screen masking. And again, it's in multiple different places. It's going to be in our docs. It's going to be on the desktop of our computer. There's a version that works on the desktop, okay? So the version within Google that I'm going to show you is only going to kind of gray out my Google screen. But if a student needs kind of more holistic support across their whole computer, having the desktop version of this tool on can really help because it goes across all the different windows that a student might use if they're working in Word, if they're working in a PDF, if they're working on the web, versus this version of the screen mask that I'm going to show you because I'm just in the Google toolbar that works in Google. We'll just show you Google, okay? But know that it will work on our other toolbars as well, okay? Very straightforward. This tool is going to support students who might have traumatic brain injuries, concussions, migraines, visual supports that are needed. But how it works, simply click on the button and it's going to put this color overlay over the top of our computer screen, okay? I have one that's kind of red right now. It's slightly opaque so I can kind of see through. And then I have something called the reading light on, which follows my mouse and allows kind of what my mouse is in front of to be lit up in a white color, okay? Now, any of these colors, the features can be changed, adjust based on this settings button here over on the far side, okay? Also can be gotten to from our master options area as well. But as I go through here, I can actually change the background color. Okay, so maybe I want it blue instead. I can change my reading light color away from white. Maybe I want it yellow. I can change the opacity, make it lighter, make it darker, how much the reading light is opaque or not. So I don't know if you can see, I've got an entirely white line now. The height, so how big is the reading light? I can make it bigger or smaller. Okay, and we're going to use this not just sort of as a tool, an AT tool for students who might need it for visual support or because of migraines, cognitively, things like that. We're actually going to play off of this tool in a little bit and actually show you how it can help students when they take exams in regards to kind of self-quizzing as they study for exams. Okay, so I'm going to hop out of the screen mask. I'm going to turn it off by simply clicking on it. I see we have a question. Let me read from Patricia quick. I'm sorry, you may have mentioned this, but does students have to have two toolbars, one for the desktop and one for browser? Does the desktop bar work for everything? Great question, Patricia. So a student doesn't have to have both tools. I think a lot of it has to do with where they typically do work. When I worked with students in higher ed, I typically talked to them about, do you typically do work on the desktop? Do you typically do work in the cloud? And the longer I worked in higher ed, the more and more students said, hey, I'm doing work in the cloud. I'm doing work in Google. I'm not doing as much on the desktop of my computer. And so I tended to kind of have them download the Google version more and more. But there are definitely some things on the desktop version that can be beneficial to students, like the OCR tool. So when I worked with students, I always had them download both just in case they needed the other features. And again, the reason why there's a little bit of a differentiation between the Google version versus the download or versus the desktop version is based on operating system, based on how Google browsers work. There's some variation that we do our best to fit, but can't always do it all. So I would always set them up with both. Typically, though, they used one predominantly over the other, typically 90%, 95% even, okay? And then Douglas says, I can't wait to use the screen masking tool. Douglas, I've talked to multiple people who have students and then both professionals in the field who have said the same thing you've said and said how much of a game changer it's going to be or has been for them or their students. It's increased the amount of time that they can spend online working, things like that. So it's a great tool, and it's even a more fun study tool actually. That's what I really like it for. So all right, the next tool I'm going to talk about quickly is a tool called Simplify, okay? Simplify only works in the Google version, but it looks like this. It's the little 4 lines that get kind of smaller as you go down with the downward arrow. What this tool is going to do is if you knew about the tool, oh my gosh, I'm thinking of it right now. Mercury Reader. It's one of my extensions up here. It essentially does something really similar to that, or any type of tool that's going to kind of parse out what it is that students are reading. I've clicked on it when I'm in a website, and what it's done is it's removed any of that kind of erroneous text that's on the page, okay? Really great for students with visual disabilities, students who just need a more distraction-reduced environment. It removes kind of anything and just gives you the guts, just gives you the text, okay? All those read-write tools are going to follow you to a new web page that opens up, okay? And then it gives students the ability to kind of customize, change, adjust what it looks like, okay? We can do things like flip it white on black, black on white, things like that. So I've just inversed our colors. I can change the font size, so I'm making it bigger, smaller. I can also change the font to be a variety of different, there's like 8 or 10 here, whatever works best for a student, including open dyslexic as well, which sometimes can be really beneficial for students, okay? And then I can also do things like change it from single space 1.5 to double spaced, okay? Studies have shown that this ability to change and adjust what text looks like can be really beneficial, not just for students with visual disabilities, but students who might have dyslexia, tracking, you name it. There's a whole bunch of different ways, reasons, etc., that it can be beneficial, okay? Now, the other neat thing with this tool, I'm going to flip it back to black on white, just so that you can kind of see it. Over on the far side here is this button called Simplify, and it's got a plus and a minus on either side. Plus is grayed out, minus is lit up right now. And what I can do is as I click Simplify, it's going to reformat the text and actually pull out content every time I click on it. And it is going to simplify the text, okay? It's not going to level the text to a certain grade level. It's not going to change the words. It's simply going to remove sentences from the reading, okay? So if a student for some reason is struggling with comprehension, the content is really challenging. It's again an English language learner, for example. You can have them parse out some of it, have them do a one read through, okay? It's gonna be just kind of like a cut down version of the reading, have them add some more content back in, have them add some more content back in again, have them keep reading it, or maybe go up a couple levels each time until they get the full reading. Again, we're not resummarizing, we're not rewording, it's simply removing sentences from the paragraphs to make the reading essentially shorter and more condensed for them to understand the content so that again, they can build back up to the full reading level, okay? Robin says, I find the Simplify tool to be painfully slow. Is a setting problem on my end? Robin, I would not have any idea about that, to be honest. Anytime I've used it, it's been pretty quick. Best bet would be maybe to connect with our tech support team to figure out what might be going on. It might be something with the number of tabs in your browsers. I'm going out on a limb and trying to think of what it might be. If I've got a lot of stuff open on my computer, sometimes that slows it down. It might be the website, maybe the context of the web page. There's a million reasons why. But tech support is really great. Otherwise, I can try to look into it and connect it with your rep too, okay? Now, the next tool I'm going to talk about before we start talking about study skills, because we focus mostly on reading here, is our OCR tool. Now, our optical character recognition tool is called Scan. It's available on the desktop of our computer, and I'm just going to briefly open up our desktop tool and show it to you. But it's a tool that will allow you to optical character recognize inaccessible, unreadable PDFs. Now, the Scan tool is not going to tag it. It's not going to make it accessible. It's simply going to optical character recognize each of the words in the file that you put in there and allow the student to read it with our tools, okay? The scan button's up here at the top. It's available both Microsoft Windows and also Mac as well. Simply click on the scan tool. It's going to bring up this window if it behaves itself, of course. You can either scan from a file or scan from a scanner. I always like to do the scan from file. Select your file, either click and drag it or find it on your computer from kind of searching. And then you can either make another PDF or you can make a Word document, okay? What's nice about this Make Word document, we'll talk about it in a little bit when we talk about study skills. So even if you have an accessible, readable, I should say, PDF, you can actually turn it into a Word doc, which can be really useful for one of our study tips. Simply click scan. It's going to ask you to rename the tool, ask you where you want it saved, and then in a few minutes, it'll actually give you the file. How long it takes varies depending upon if you have a really long document, if it's a really complex document, if there's lots of kind of erroneous text and markings on it, things like that. Average about 15 pages per minute is what I found when I worked with students, give or take, okay? Not a rule, just kind of a guideline. So let students know it kind of takes a couple minutes, okay? Now let's talk about some of the study skills tools that are in here. Before we do, I've got a question. Shannon says, should the scan remain readable if we save it? I've had problems with it. Shannon, it should remain readable if you save it. It should remain readable both in Read&Write and also in other tools because you are getting an optical character recognized copy with it. If you're running into issues, reach out to me and we can definitely look at some of the files and figure out what might be going on. So. I've not had that issue though. All right, let's hop back into our PDF, okay? I've got this Introduction to Sociology textbook. One of the tools I worked with all the time with my students was our highlighting tools, okay? They're built in simply by clicking on the highlighters. You're gonna get the sub drop-down menu here. How they work, click and highlight the text that you want highlighted, click on the color, it's gonna pop in there. Okay, and you can do this with a couple words at a time, multiple words, it doesn't really matter. We're going to talk about strategies in a couple minutes, but this works in your EPUBs, PDFs. It's also going to work on websites as well. So if I'm getting content in a website, I hop back into this, you know, climatology and meteorology website. It's going to do the same thing. Now these highlights won't stay when I close the web page, but it does give me the ability to have it on screen here for the time being. Okay, then the partner tool that comes with this highlighters is our collect highlights button, which looks kind of like the circle of arrows and variety of colors. By clicking on this button, it's going to pull out all of these highlights into a document for us. If we're in Google, Read&Write for Google, and we're logged in with a Google account, it's going to send it to our Google Drive. Logged in with Office 365, it's going to go to our OneDrive account. If we're on the desktop of our computer, it's going to open up a fresh Word document. But what's key about this is it's going to give us this option of collecting and sorting our highlights by color or by position. So do we want all of our yellows, all of our greens, all of our blues together? Or do we want to order them in the order they appear in the document? So yellow, then green, then blue, because that's what I've highlighted here in our document. I can also choose just to pull out one color if I want, like I only want this color. Clicking OK, it's going to take a second to think, and then it will automatically open up that document that I mentioned so that you can see it. And there they are. Okay, it's going to give me the website link. It's not going to give me the bibliographical or the citation information. And the reason we don't do that is because there's so many different versions, so many different ways that it can be done. The standards change here and there. I know that was a request last week from someone in the webinar or someone I talked to. I knew it's in the front of my head. I did kind of talk to our developers and said, hey, this is something Higher Ed's asking for. No word if we'll actually change that. It'll be updated, etc. But that's what the link is at the bottom. And it works the same way in a PDF as well. Click highlights. It's going to take a second, going to give me that option here. It decides it wants to work. And then it will prompt me and then send me off to the document, okay? Throughout all this, I can also click and highlight and erase any of the content that has been in here as well, okay? And it looks like I have a question. Can you use this during exams that require a lockdown browser? I'm excited to hear about all the features. Liz, I'm going to talk about that a little bit shortly. So hang tight and we'll talk more about that towards the end of today, okay? I have a few updates to give you, but not a bunch. There'll probably be more as the summer goes on, okay? But hang tight. There's more coming, okay? Next up, annotation tools. So within our PDF, in addition to the highlighters we have built in, we also have things like our typewriter tool and our shape tool. And I'm going to run you through these really quick. In addition to highlighting, it can be beneficial if students annotate their text, okay? One way to do that is with the typewriter. Simply click on it. They're going to get this box that pops up, and they can type out really anything in the box that they want. They can change the size, making it bigger. They can change the color. Maybe they want it, teal for whatever reason. There's some writing features built in. I'll mention this next week when we go over writing features, but they can also have it played out loud, whatever it is in their note. They can move it around the page wherever it works for them. Oops, let's try that again. And then when they're done, click the button, and that's a poor color. It's not very accessible, sorry, but they can always click on it, go in, change the color, and there it is again, okay? Pushpin works similar in that when they click on it, they click on a word, they get the same type of box, but when they're done with it, you get a little pushpin indicating that there's more here. Click on it and you'll be able to see your note. Okay, freehand drawing, similar in that we can adjust kind of the color, the thickness of the line, and then it's just freehand drawing. Students can simply draw, doodle on here, whatever works, okay? All of them have erasers or trash cans with them. And then last up is shape drawing. Again, we have the ability to change the color, the shape, the fill, and then do we circle it? Do we draw a rectangle? Do we draw a line? There we go. Okay. Now, practicality wise, if a student is taking a PDF exam and it's something where it's just multiple choice, for example, they can definitely use something like the circle or the freehand tool to circle their answer. For something like a test question where they need to type out their answers, they can definitely use the typewriter feature to type out in a certain area of their test to answer the question. And that could even be true too if they have a digital copy of their textbook and they decide to use this for like the study questions at the end of the book. While that's not one of the strategies I mentioned, something to keep in the back of your head, hey, we can get all the way down to the end of chapter questions and they can actually type the answers out in there, okay? Annotation tools in PDF. Now, we do have the highlighters in the EPUB. From what I'm hearing, we're working on getting the annotation tools within the EPUB reader as well. So know that those are coming at some point when, not entirely sure, okay? Next up, vocabulary list, okay? We're gonna talk more about this in a few minutes when we do some practical strategies, but it looks like this. It's the 3 boxes with the 3 lines. It's called vocabulary. What we can do is we can go through any reading, any document with highlighters available and highlight individual words that we think might be important. So maybe I'm sitting here and I'm going through my book and sociology is a word I need to study. Go ahead and highlight it. Maybe culture is another one, okay? And students can go through, they can highlight as many of these as they want, click on the vocabulary box, and much like that, the collect highlights button, it's gonna create a brand new, fresh document for me. Go ahead and it's gonna give me the word, the meaning, the symbol, and then also this notes column here. Okay, so it's a quick way for students to make this vocabulary list that they can kind of use as a springboard for studying. I mentioned in the handout some kind of useful tips on how to use it. We're going to go over these in a couple minutes, but know that this is kind of the springboard for how it works. And again, it's in PDFs. It's in the desktop version. It has that as well. We've got it online, in the Google version, on a website. So it's in all these different places for students to use, okay? Any customization to align to different symbol sets? Yes, Mark, I believe so. there's a limited number, if I remember right. You'd be able to choose your symbol set based on what might be in the options area, based on the version, if you're using the Google, the Mac, the desktop version, etc. I can double check on that. There might be some small differences between the different platforms. I'm not sure that there's super robust ones, for example, that are extremely like high level illustrations for higher ed. There's some though. I feel like there's some, and I'm not 100% sure on that one, but I'll double check and I'll get back to you. We'll get you that information. Okay. Last tool I'm going to show you before we get into kind of the practical strategies of this is going to be our Discover tool. So I'm going to hop back into my web page, back into that Simplify. So I have to get into that Simplify again. So back to my website, click on that Simplify. Now I didn't talk about this Discover tool when we initially were talking about this area, and I wonder if someone back, of the 80 of you said, wait a minute, you forgot this. Well, this is why. By clicking on Discover, it's a new tool that recently came out. It's still in beta. We're still kind of working out some of the bugs. But what it does is it's going to take a minute. It's going to analyze our text here and figure out, okay, what are some words in here that students might need to know more information about, okay? And what you can do is when it's done running, it'll give you a purple underline wherever there's a word that we've connected it to some more information. You can click on it. It's going to typically give you a picture and then a paragraph about what it is that word is about or what that topic is about. Okay, so I clicked on October. It's going to give me information about what October is. Okay, maybe cyclones. Maybe I need to click on that one. Okay, oops, and I moved my page so it went away. But there's a picture of a cyclone. Here's what it is. So again, it's a nice little tool if you need something more than a dictionary. Maybe the dictionary definition isn't enough and students need more context about something. This is a really great way to have a little bit more information that's literally just with a click of a button for students. They don't have to go elsewhere. They can just look at it this way. Okay, so that's Discover. Um, if you're following along slide by slide, I have Audio Maker in here for studying. We're going to show you that. So as a result, I'm going to move to slide 25. Okay. And I just want to mention, I mentioned it earlier, that those options are going to be some of your best friends as students get set up with the reading feature. So again, don't forget the speech rate, the voice, things like how words are pronounced. On the desktop version, you can adjust that. So if you have a student who, for example, is a medical student and they have a lot of really complex terms, maybe having them read that content on the desktop where it allows you to customize how words are said might be a better way to do it, better platform for them. And again, there's that little variability. So if you ever have questions, reach out to tech support or your rep and they can kind of say, this is how this works, etc. Or this might be a better way for the student to get access to it, or use those resource places that we talked about last week, the tech support site, the resource site, the YouTube video, things like that. So in the PowerPoint, I've got 5 quick resources I'm going to show you. On slide 25, we talk about the toolbar diagram resources, and I take 0 credit for all of these, but they were created by other users. It's simply a visual guideline of what each of the toolbars does with what the tools do. Okay, so as you go across, the first one I've got on there is the Read/Write toolbar for Google. The next one is going to be for Office 365. The next one is going to be the PDF reader and then the highlighter tool. They're going to be linked in the slide deck. I'll also send them out, but these are also all within our resource page of our website that we talked about last week. Okay, the next resources I'm going to show you are more sort of guides. Now, guides like this are on our website. If you go into the resource area, it'll talk about, how each of the tools work, what are the symbols, things like that. But the PowerPoint that I created was sort of taken off of what Kimberly and I talked about, our PD person, and then documents like this that actually go through and say, what is the tool, what's the symbol, where does it work, what are the benefits, so a little bit of that why, and then application instruction. Okay, so there's one here for Read/Write for Google Chrome. Much of this is the same for the desktop. And then there's one here, a little bit more boiled down, that kind of walks you through how to make the tool work. We share this between K-12 and higher education as a resource, so know that even though it says parents up here, it does indeed work for college students as well. Okay, it works for staff, it works for whomever. Okay, so This is available to you as resources. And again, this is linked into the deck, okay? All right, seeing no questions, I'm going to start talking about practical strategies. And there's 9 of them that I'm going to go through today. I mentioned one a little bit ago, so kind of a bonus 10. My goal this summer is actually, in addition to having this all recorded here today, is to also create practical strategy videos of each of these so that you can share them with students. We have them on the web as a resource. So if you can't talk a student through how to do any of these strategies, or you need to call on it yourself to watch it to know how to do it, you've got them at your fingertips, okay? I'm hopeful that they'll be done by the time school starts. I make no promises, but that's my goal. So watch for information about these coming out, but know that that's my goal, is because I want this to be easy for you guys to be able to apply with students later on, okay? Slide 28 just lists out all of the practical strategies. I'm not going to read them off one at a time, but first and foremost, we're going to talk about active versus passive reading. And this is something that I work with students all the time on. There's a lot of different strategies, a lot of different ways to do this out there. I'm just kind of pulling from kind of the best of all of them. If you have a strategy that works for you, go ahead and use it. The key though is that we really need to work with students around how to read and the mindset around reading. And I know that many of us, if you're in disability resources, you probably don't have time to work with students day to day on this. But if you work within a student support center, maybe your peers do, or maybe part of your initiative around retention is such that you could give a couple minutes or give a seminar on this for students to understand this better. But basically, here, let me hop back into our PowerPoint so you can see what I'm talking about if you aren't following along. But basically, when I've worked with students, it's kind of this mindset, we have to get them thinking about being active versus passive reading. So many students are just trained to read, where, just read the text, but they aren't actually taught like how to read, how to actively read, okay? First and foremost, they need to have a stake in it, which, that's all around motivation and buy-in and things like that. But we want to give them a strategy so that they can read actively to help digest and understand what it is that they are reading, okay? So let's actually break it down. What does active versus passive reading look like, okay? So I've got my PDF of my sociology textbook. I'm actually going to remove these highlights away so that it's not confusing. First and foremost, read the chapter summary. So I'm going to scroll all the way to the bottom of my chapter, make sure I don't miss it. But I'm going to, as a student, read the summary first, okay? Let's find it. Why sociology? There it is. Okay, so section summary. I'm going to go through and read these 4 points. Okay, sometimes it's a paragraph, sometimes it's different sections. It's going to give me that 30,000 foot overview to understand what this book is about. Okay, students need that context, they need that framework. Okay, once I've done this, I have students go back up to the top of their chapter and go through, and I have them read each of the section headers. Again, it should kind of follow along closely with what we talked about in the summary, but what I have students do then is actually choose a color highlighter. So maybe it's going to be this blue one because it's the first one on our list, and highlight all of these section headers. And this is just for when I do strategic highlighting in a little bit. I have these all marked off as kind of placeholders to help me organize my content, okay? So I'm going through and I'm reading, what are society and culture, okay? Studying patterns, how sociologists view society. Again, and this should kind of match up a little bit with what I've read. And give me, again, that context, that framework, okay? Then go up, find that first paragraph of my reading right here. Using my reading tools, either that click to speak or that play button, go ahead and read a paragraph at a time. Listen to it out loud.
Introduction to Sociology. We all belong to many groups.
Once it's done reading that paragraph, I'm going to pause it. If I get to the end, if I'm good to go, we can move on to the next step. But if at any time throughout my reading of this paragraph, I don't understand a word, I'm going to want to pause it and call on my dictionary tool or my picture dictionary or my translator tool to make sure I understand the words that I'm reading. Okay, so maybe for some reason I don't understand the word class. I go through, I hit that word, don't get it, click on that dictionary, it gets me the definition, and I can go back and listen to that sentence again. Okay, I don't want to get to the end and have 15 words that I didn't understand. Okay, next, Asking questions, thinking about the paragraph. Okay, first and foremost, did I understand what I read? Do I need to reread it? Does it make sense? But then also some higher level thinking. Okay, and one of the resources I provided to you, if I can find it in my huge list of resources that I have up for you, I've included this active reading strategies sentence starters document. Okay. Some of these students might not totally buy into. I get it. They're higher ed students. It took some convincing. But down at the bottom, reread when, the sentence contains a lot of information. I didn't understand what I read. But thinking about, maybe some of these higher level thinking, evaluating, or inferring. Maybe these are some questions that you can prompt your students with. Maybe what's the purpose of this chapter? Is there something that the author is trying to tell me? If I were to repeat this to my classmate, what would I tell them about the paragraph? And again, it's getting students to buy into this, but if they can do some of this when they read, it's just going to stick that much more. It's going to increase their comprehension. Okay. If they feel like they've got the definitions down, they don't feel like they have any more questions, go back, have them move to the next paragraph. If any of these questions are lingering, go back and read it again. From there, then, once we kind of have this, they can go through and do things like highlighting strategically, taking notes if they're a student who likes to take notes, for example. Okay. I worked with students on strategic highlighting all the time. And basically we talked about, when you found the main idea, when you found the supporting details, were those things you did in English class in high school? And they always said, yes, absolutely. And I said, well, you're going to use it here again today. And so making that connection was helpful to get them to buy in. But they go through and choose which color is going to be their main idea. So maybe, pink is going to be the main idea of the paragraph. So they're going to go through and say, this is the main idea. Okay. And then maybe yellow is our supporting details. Okay. So I'm going through, and while I'm not promising these are the main ideas, you get the idea. Okay, maybe green is a vocabulary word. Okay. Going through and doing this strategically so that they have some information to pull out later using our collect highlight button to study from later. Okay. Or if they prefer, using any of these annotation tools up here. Okay. Now, one of the other resources I included was this Read and Write using the highlighter tool to collect and categorize. Okay. Our plan is to update this a little bit so it's more higher ed focused this summer, but it gives you kind of a starting point to talk with students, or gives you as someone who's using the tool and working with students some ideas. Okay. So what are the categories? Is there a way that you can predetermine what these are for students so that it's just kind of muscle memory for them? The first category is always yellow. It's always going to be our main idea. And in chemistry, the second one is going to be this, this, and this, which might be different than your English class, which maybe your second category is typically this, this, and this. So again, this takes some kind of higher level thinking for students. How am I going to use these tools in my favor to help me? But if we can get some examples in front of them, get some, video saying, hey, this is how we do it, have some modeling, they're going to buy into it, and it's going to help them at the end of the day. Okay. Once they get through all that, at that point, then they can go to the next paragraph. And I kind of cheated here because I had my first paragraph just being this one, but I highlighted all of it. But you get the idea. We want them to read a chunk of context and then go back and understand it. And maybe for a student, one paragraph isn't going to be enough. Maybe they need a couple in higher ed based on the topic area. Okay. So we covered two of them now, that effective reading strategy, that active versus passive reading, and then using those strategic highlighters. Okay. Key things for the strategic highlighting is it's going to help organize, and it's going to hopefully help decrease that anxiety around studying later on. Okay. You're going to be able to have something more tangible to study from later. That's all laid out for you in one place. Okay. So I'm going to pull this out. It's not going to be the full chapter, but you're going to get the idea that I've got the blues as all of my topic headings. And then here are the different areas I've highlighted. And I can study from this instead of an entire textbook that might be super overwhelming for me as a student. Okay. I've done some more work. It's taken me some time, but it saves me in the long run because more of it is stuck and I've got something tangible to study from later. Okay. I mentioned those two resources. They're both listed on slide 32, the active reading strategies, sentence starters, and then also the collect highlights, okay? 2 of the 9 done, out of the way. All right, let's talk about 2 and 3 column notes, okay? I mentioned before how that OCR tool is going to be super important when we, later today for one of our strategies, and this is where it's going to come into play. So we can load in one of those PDF files and have it spit out as a Word file, okay? 2 or 3 column notes is a way for us to read content and organize it and have a way to take notes and interact with it that's not so static as the PDF. Oops, the PDF here, okay? It's going to give us a little bit more flexibility, a little bit more finesse in how we work with it, okay? Now I've got 2 examples. I'm going to include them in the resource pack I'm sending out. These are just very basic examples so you can see just the bare bones of what this looks like. But what I did was I took the OCR tool, I turned that PDF into a Microsoft Word. I only copied the first couple paragraphs just for space and for time, but you can see that the same sociology reading, I've copied the text into a 2-column table. Okay, and to do that in most of our word processing documents, it's under insert, it's under format, it's under tools something. Simply go in and create like a 2x2 table. I've copy and pasted the text here, had a column at the top reading text, and on the other side, I have listed notes. And below it, I have notes, questions, my lecture notes, real life or practical examples. Students can customize this to be whatever it is that they want. It doesn't matter what it is. What matters is that it's something tangible that they can take notes on, that's interactive for them to do things, okay? So much like with the PDF, go through using our reading tools, hear things read out loud, and then using this column over here, they can do things like take notes. And so here's what I did, okay? I've got my highlights. I didn't go through and do all of the topic headings. That was a no-no. I'll have to fix it for the video. But I've gone through and I've listened and I've done my strategic highlighting. Okay. And over in the notes area, I've taken some notes. I've re-summarized what sociology means to me in my own definition. Okay. I've pulled out some information about macro versus micro level, and I've actually used color coding to pair them together. So the pink talks about macro in both places, the blue tealy blue kind of talks about micro in both places, okay? There's a lot of flexibility here, and it's just ability for students to do whatever they see fit, whatever works best for them, okay? And they can choose whatever works best for them up here, okay? Similar for 3 column notes, we've got 3 different columns instead, okay? And I've actually changed the landscape of the paper so that it's not portrait, but it's landscape all the way across. But we've got our reading text on the left column. I've had my notes here in the middle, and then connections and real life examples. So that same content that I just showed you, what is sociology? I've got those same key parts highlighted. There's my summary. There's my part where I'm talking about micro and macro level sociology trends. But because I chose this to be kind of connections and real life examples, I thought to myself and I went, wait a minute. I took economics last semester and we talked about macro versus microeconomics. You know, macro is that big picture, micro is the smaller. And so it might take a little time to show students to get them to buy into it and set this up for them, but it's a more interactive way for them to work with the text. And then again, they can do things like pull this out to have a more parsed down highlighted of what the text is. So maybe I don't, highlight this stuff over here, but I can then again pull out what I've read and highlighted here for that easier study guide. So I've just changed and adjusted what it is that it looks like my reading is in. It's in Word or Google Docs, not a PDF, not an EPUB, but instead it gives me the ability to work with, to try, things like that, okay? Just double checking I didn't miss anything, okay? Okay. Not seeing any questions, and I've still got 66 of you, which is a pretty good number. I'm excited that this many of you stuck around. Awesome. Okay. let's talk about vocabulary study lists, okay? We talked about this a little bit ago. This is strategy number 4. We showed it to you before, but basically what we can do, and I'm going to go through and I'm going to kind of remove all of these highlights, get rid of them so I can show you using this same PDF file. But those vocabulary lists can be a really great way for students to have a basic kind of jumping off point, or a diving board or diving dock, because I was up at our cabin this weekend, for students to kind of have a way to start the learning vocabulary words around a certain topic area. Okay. And actually, you know what? I'm gonna go into a different PDF document that we have instead that I like a little bit better than the sociology one. I just have to find it. That's my Spanish one. Give me just a second. I have a really great biology one. Okay, here it is. It's a chapter about blood, biology textbook of some kind. Okay. PDF tool up here. Again, this will work in Word. It'll work wherever you want. But basically, what we can do, go through with our highlighters, and we're going to choose different words that I might need to learn what the definition is. Okay, so blood is one. Okay, maybe organ is another. Okay, and actually I'm not going to use organ. I'm going to choose a different one. Let me get rid of that one. Nope, I'm going to keep it. Never mind. Maybe oxygen is another word. Maybe I don't know what oxygen is. Okay. Maybe vein. Okay. So I've gone through and I'm reading this list of words and I'm going, I don't know this. I don't know this. These are all words I need to learn. Quickly click on that vocabulary list. What's going to happen is it's going to open up another document for me. It's just pokey pokey. Let me try refreshing the page here. I got a lot of tabs going. I think Robin mentioned, sometimes it's slow. It's because I've got 18 tabs open at the top here. Okay. So highlight the words that you are wanting to create this list from. Okay. Make sure that they pop up here. Click on the vocabulary. There we go. Now it's cruising. Just needed a little kick, little kick. And it's going to create that table for us for studying vocabulary words. Okay. Now, the funny thing about organ, the reason I didn't love that word is because it gives me for the symbol, the incorrect symbol for organ, but it does show you that, hey, the word organ is multifaceted. There's multiple different ways. But again, it's going to give you that word, that meaning, that symbol, that note. And while the symbol might seem, not great image-wise, it might be a little elementary looking, these visuals can be really great for students to study from. Having that visual piece is important to them. Okay. So it helps things stick. It's sometimes a method for flashcarding too, having a picture with your flashcard, not just the words. But this allows students to quickly have a list to study from. They can print this out and create flashcards with it, having the word or the symbol on the front and the meaning on the back. They can even just have this as a tool and change this notes area up at the top for, maybe it's, practical examples, practical, there we go, examples or connections again, whatever it is that helps the stick. Okay. They've got options. They just have to customize it for what works for them. Okay. The key, digital flashcards, a way to study, a vehicle to make physical flashcards. You've got this ability to kind of change, customize, edit for students. Get rid of the symbols if you don't want it, okay? But know that with just a click of a button, just highlighting a few words, clicking a button, you've got this base for students to be able to start using this to help them study, as opposed to just passively reading their text again, okay? Now there's 2 vocabulary list resources that I pulled together. I'm going to find where they are in my lots of tabs here. This gives you more of an idea from kind of a higher ed level, but then also more of if you have students maybe transitioning into school, or if you work with students who might be K-12, as in like maybe sophomores, juniors, seniors, doing like post-secondary education at your school. Either of these you could use with them. I included the more higher or the more high school version just for that reason, in case you have higher ed or high school students working with you in a post-secondary capacity. But this one here, a little bit more higher ed. It's got that higher ed modifications at the back, but it comes up and actually shows you the different categories that students can create. They could add lecture notes. They could add translations. They could add examples. Basically you just add on columns and rows to the table. to give it a more robust study guide. Okay, so this one's pretty robust. It's got like 6 different columns. This one over here that I've included again on the or on the slide deck, again, more for your kind of sophomore, junior, seniors you might be working with, only has 5. But again, synonyms, antonyms, categories, memory cues, things like that. So while the work is still higher ed, it might be something a little bit more attainable for students who are, fresh to college to be working with to kind of help them understand this, okay? So a couple different resources for you. Use the one that works best for you and the students that you work with, okay? Again, both of these are listed out on slide 37, okay? All right, similar to this, but not entirely the same, is going to be word or phrase bank creation, okay? Word or phrase bank creation is going to be really similar to our vocabulary list, but instead of using vocabulary here, we're going to actually use our collect highlights tool, okay? So maybe I'm going through and I'm seeing, more of these phrases. Maybe it's not just vocabulary, but maybe oxygen deficient, okay? Maybe, let's see, blah, 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 carbon dioxide. Maybe that's another word. Maybe there's a phrase, um, fluid tissue, okay? We can really make this whatever students need to study. Once we have all this content highlighted, go ahead, click that collect highlights button. It's going to again ask us, do you want all of them, some of them, none of them? Click the OK button. It's going to create a document for us with a running list of all of the things that we highlighted, okay? I can then get rid of the highlights because the highlight color doesn't matter here because we just picked one color, it doesn't matter. And then what I can do is this again gives me the basis of something like a study guide. It gives me the basis to start summarizing, to create a study guide, okay? And we're going to talk more about what we can do with this in a minute, specifically around the pictures. But maybe it's something where these are keywords and these are the words that I need to study for my vocab test. I can go in and put definitions in, okay? Maybe I need to create a summary of some kind with these words, or maybe take a couple of these words and put them into a real life scenario, okay? The organs live in my body and the blood flows throughout my body. I don't know, I wasn't a biology major, but even just having the space in this list can help students again start to scaffold their study habits. With just a couple highlights and a click of a button, they've got this all right in front of them. It's just a matter of letting them know that it's here for them to be able to use in their favor to help them study, okay? So instead of creating the vocab list and giving you that information, they're in the driver's seat to just have these as a base to do with what they'd like, okay? Now, the next one I'm going to talk about is called add visuals. And we did a little bit of that when it came down to having the vocabulary list. It already pre-pulled in the symbols here, okay? Now, with something like this word bank that we made, for example, or if we were to create a more complex study guide, which I'm going to show you in a minute, have students use the picture dictionary in their favor, okay? Now, what we can do, clicking on the word blood, simply putting my cursor in the word blood will actually quickly pull up those images that a student can quickly then copy and add into our document. Quick, easy, copy and paste. And now we've got that visual again to make a flashcard, to just have a visual cue for them to help them when they're studying. And they could pull it from the picture dictionary. It's going to give you, our set of pictures, but they could go out to the internet and copy pictures into, okay? This can be really robust for the vocabulary list. You could add it to 2 and 3 column notes even, go back to this document and have them add in, maybe the word culture is in here. Let's pull this picture dictionary up, click on the word culture. It gives me a visual for the word culture. Maybe this one speaks to me as a student. Copy the image, and I can go ahead and paste it into my 2 or 3 column notes to give me that visual when I'm studying later on. Okay, so it's just plugging and playing these different features where it's going to benefit a student. Where this really helps is foreign language a lot of the time too. If we're creating a foreign language list that we need to study from, having a picture that goes with the words when we're studying our concepts can be really, really beneficial, okay? when I work with people on executive functioning, I do a presentation all around different strategies around executive functioning. How do we help students? And one of the ones that I got off of one of my peers was to utilize these pictures, to utilize visuals. Visual information gets stored in a different part of the brain than words do. And so having the ability to have different means of information getting into your brain just gives you another way to get it to stick. Okay. So having different methods that are other than just, reading again, it's going to focus with that retention of information and that recall of information that's so important when students are studying. Not that passive learning and rereading things hoping it sticks. It's that active learning. Okay. And I know the biggest challenge for all is getting students to buy into this, getting students to want to do these strategies. But once they get these strategies in place, they tend to use them and it works for them. Okay. Next, what I'm going to talk about is Audio Maker. And I actually was not the one who came up with this one. A colleague of mine who's in my territory, who I've enjoyed getting to know, was the one who actually told me about this, and we figured out how to make it work in their benefit. So I have to thank her. But this one's using Audio Maker to your advantage. Now, I mentioned Audio Maker before, clicking and highlighting, and then being able to use the Audio Maker tool up here. I'm going to actually show you the desktop version because this one allows you to do a little bit more finessing. So this is where sometimes having both versions can help because the way it works is just a little different, okay? So this is opening up right now. So again, really great for doing MP3s of books, files on the go, listening, things like that, okay? On the desktop version, you can actually click on this Audio Maker tool up here at the top. And what it's going to do is it's going to actually open up a window for me. Okay. And you should be able to see this window here, allowing me to type or paste text in here. Okay. What I did was I actually pulled up a study guide from the internet about anatomy and physiology. And what I can do is that I can actually copy and paste the questions from the study guide. So maybe I took some time and created a study guide. I know a lot of students I've worked with said, Rachel, they don't give me a study guide. And I worked with them on creating their own study guide and how the strategies we just showed you a couple minutes ago help create that basis to make their own study guide, which in turn helps them learn the content. Okay. I can simply click and paste in here the questions from my study guide. Okay. Now, if I were to just create and preview the audio just like this with them listed one after another, it's going to read line by line by line. Define the terms of anatomy and physiology. 2, list the 10 characteristics of life. 3, what creates your metabolism? Okay. But what we found is that if we enter twice, put an ellipse or 3 periods, and hit the enter key again, every time we leave, have one of these return, ellipse, return, it gives us about 3 seconds of blank audio, giving a student time to answer the question. So it's essentially when they listen to the audio in the car, when they're going to and from school, if they're just studying in their room and they need a different way of studying, again, that recall, they can go through and listen to it this way and hear it.
1. Define the terms anatomy and physiology.
And you're going to hear it not speaking to me. So it's giving me time to talk out loud. This is what it is that we're talking about, okay? And then
2.
if I wanted, I could actually add the answer in here, okay? And what I've done is I've actually got the answer. Let me find it. Give me just a second. One moment. Let's find the document. Here it is. Copy and paste the answer in. Have that down at the bottom. And then when I get done having kind of my time to answer, it will then play back the answer to me. And I can say, did I get this right or did they get this wrong? When they're ready to create the MP3, just click create MP3. It's on their computer desktop and they can put it wherever they want, listen to it on the desktop, etc. Okay. This is really great for foreign languages. I was a student who took American Sign Language as a college student, so I could put in phrases here, have it essentially read that phrase to me, and I could sit there and I could sign out loud what it is that phrase would be. And then the next one, phrase out loud. So this is really great if you're especially practicing things like conversations with someone, how are you? Sign something to them or speak out loud to them, blah, 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 blah. Or if you're doing a vocabulary list for learning a foreign language, you put the English word in here. So maybe it's Spanish and I need to know the word for car, and I give myself 6 seconds and say it out loud to quiz myself. And then maybe the street, there's another one, and it gives me time to say it out loud. So by creating your own sort of study guide, it's a different way to study, which kind of keeps it fresh and keeps it different for students so that they don't kind of have that fatigue, and it's more likely to get it to stick than if they're just, again, passively listening. Okay. Now, the last one I'm going to kind of show you, the second last one I'm going to talk about is using that screen masking tool in our favor. Okay, so I've got this study guide here as a Google document right now. I'm going to open up my Read and Write toolbar. I'm going to refresh my page quick to get it to open up. Using the screen masking tool in our favor, let me open it up. Oh, there we go. I can turn on screen masking after I've created some type of a study guide for me and quiz myself visually. So it's different than the audio. I've got the visual here. But what I can do is under my settings, go in, I'm going to change the background color to black. I'm going to make it super opaque so I can't see anything. Or I could make it, blue and super opaque. The key is that I don't want to be able to see anything behind it. Make sure my reading light is on. Go ahead and click OK, and start up at the top of my study guide. Go through, define the terms anatomy and physiology. Okay, so I can talk to myself out loud, define what anatomy and physiology is, blah, 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 and then scroll my mouse down and be able to then see what the words are. Okay, what the answer is. Okay. Same with physiology, same type of thing. Go through, quiz myself. Okay, so it's a different way to quiz. If students would rather read things out loud, they don't like the auditory, this is a great way to do it. Okay. List the 10 characteristics of life, go through, read them off, and then check my answer. Okay. So again, it's a tool that's meant to support the visual, but we're using it in a way that makes it exciting and different to study. Again, all of this within this one toolbar, or calling on the desktop version a little bit, or calling on the Google version a little bit if you have a different primary. Okay. All of these study skills all in this one place. Okay. Pretty straightforward. Great way for students to study. Okay. The last one I'm going to mention is foreign language. Okay. Our tool can read foreign language out loud, and I know that some people struggle with it, say it doesn't work. It does indeed work. The catch is that if you are reading out loud, let me find my document. Here we go. It's going to read Spanish out loud. It's going to read other foreign languages out loud. If you have a book like this one that has both English and Spanish in it, it's not always going to be able to differentiate between the English and the Spanish and have it read English and have it read Spanish. Instead, what it's going to sound like is someone who is Spanish or someone who is French reading the English. And I've worked with schools in my current position. I've worked with students prior to this who have said, it works pretty good for students they can tell if they've got the book open in front of them and they hear the English read by a Spanish speaker, for example, it's still, they understand the English. The key though is that the Spanish sounds like the Spanish and the French sounds like the Spanish. But what you need to do is go into your settings area, into your options, and choose a voice that is Spanish speaking, for example, or that is French speaking, or that is German speaking, okay? And then what'll happen when you go ahead and read a word, you're going to hear it in the foreign language and have it pronounced the correct way, okay? So know that it does read foreign language, okay? pair it with the audio maker for the quizzing. It gives students the ability to have some different ways of studying a foreign language if they don't have a partner to work with, or they don't have somebody who can be there with them to help them study, okay? Before I hop back in and talk about some of the last minute closing up things, a lot of these study strategies, I have to give credit to our PD person, Kimberly. She has this really great study strategies document. I've enclosed it within slide 50 of your deck. It talks a little bit about what it means to study, and then it does give you some visuals of these different tools we worked on today. Not all of them are in here. The 2-column notes or 3-column notes is in here. Adding visualization, for example, is in there. Some of these are things that we haven't added to this document because they're things that I brought from higher ed. Some of them are things that other people have added in. So this can be a good resource for you to call back on, to give to students, things like that. So know that it's linked in the PowerPoint, the slide deck as well, okay? As I close up in the next couple minutes, I said an hour and a half and we're getting darn close. Let's talk quickly about exams, proctoring, and online browsers, okay? You guys asked about things like respondus, things like that. We're going to talk about it here. I mentioned this last week, but I feel like it deserves to be mentioned again, okay? In an online environment, with the move, with so many schools either going hybrid, going online 100% this fall, readers and scribes are going to be a challenge. And I've talked with people about this time and time again. How do we get readers and scribes? Capitalize on read and write. If your students are already using it, have them use it in an online environment for this. Or if you have a site license of our tool, make sure all students know about it, okay? It's a great way for them to have that reading support and that writing support without having to lean on a peer, especially if you are back in your office in some way and social distancing is a must and there's limited space and capacity. You know, having a non-human do the support with technology is key, okay? We talk about it all the time. Technology is key. Probably, if you've listened to me talk about technology, I'm a huge proponent of it. And this is why, because we don't have to rely on a peer to do this. If the peer gets sick, you're not exposing other students, that social distance, so online courses, giving more independence, okay? So keep this in the back of your mind as an important tool that can be beneficial, okay? Learning management systems. I mentioned this before, that Read and Write can read content in your learning management system. Okay, I showed you the different ways. Sometimes you might have to pull the content out if it's like an image that's rendered in there or a PDF that's rendered in there, but it does read in learning management systems. Okay, tell your friends. It's a question I get all the time and it's a myth I debunk at least once a week. You don't read in learning management systems. Yes, we do. Okay, so know that it's available. And next week, we're going to talk about some tools like our talk and type and word prediction that allow you to do writing support within learning management systems as well, okay? So kind of a teaser for next week, that's coming. AccuPlacer. This is another question that I've been getting a lot more recently, especially with the move to online and distance learning in the fall, okay? Read and Write can be read with AccuPlacer exams, okay? The for sure way we know works is with the screenshot reader tool. We're working on another way that we're pretty sure works, that other schools have said works. We're just pulling together guides and information, okay? So watch for this in the next couple weeks. By the time school starts, even for some more information about how it works with AccuPlacer. But another myth I debunk, it does work with AccuPlacer. We're just pulling together how it works, okay? The million-dollar question that everyone keeps asking in addition is Respondus and working with these online testing platforms. I said last week I was hoping to have more updates. I have a little one for you, but more are going to be coming as the summer goes on, okay? Most importantly, Read and Write is going to work with Read and Write for Windows with a Respondus integration, okay? What this looks like, how it works, I'm going to have the most amount of information right before school starts when we do a kind of update update what happened this summer, prep you for fall webinar, which is, I believe, towards the end of August. August 25th is in my head, but it's that last week 7 of our series. If I have some shocking announcement, I'll break into our next few weeks of our webinars just to give you kind of that update and that taste, because I know that it's on the forefront of everyone's head. But it's coming, and from what other people have mentioned, some of these other testing systems, there are ways for Read Read&Write to work, like within AccuPlace or within other lockdown browsers. It's just a matter of kind of finessing and playing with it and trying to get it to work, okay? So between the Respondus integration, what other people are saying, we're finding ways to get this to work, okay? And hopefully this Respondus integration will not just work with Respondus, but with these other tools that have whitelisted programs, okay? No promises, but from what we're seeing with people using our tool, it might be something that's on the horizon, okay? I did this last week, kind of ideas to carry you forward over the next 2 weeks because we're not together next week. Again, that permission to play. Go try these tools. Work with a student this week or next week. Think of a student who you might work with in the fall. A typical student. What tools would you suggest? How would you train them? What study strategies would you talk to them about? Okay. Think about that. Maybe use the reading tools with your own reading. You know, if you've got a long document you need to read, maybe some student documentation, throw it in the program and have it read out loud, okay? Maybe try one of the study strategies yourself with one of the textbooks, okay? The key is to try it hands-on so that it sticks, okay? 2 weeks from now, July 21st, same time, same place, same channel. We're talking about writing and research, tools that support writing, tools that support research, and practical strategies. I don't have as many practical strategies with writing, so it'll be with an hour. I won't make us go longer, thanks to the 48 of you that stuck around. If you didn't get a chance to stick around for this whole time, use next week's time without us being together to catch up on the last little bit of the recording. There has not been any questions from the last little bit of this. I'll stick around if there are. Anyone who did submit questions that I didn't answer fully or that I didn't give you a great answer on, I'll make sure I connect you with the information and/or your rep to make sure that you feel satisfied with the answer I gave you, and that you have it moving forward, okay? Everyone, have a great couple weeks. We'll check up 2 weeks from now and talk about writing supports, okay? And like I said, I'll stick around for a few minutes if questions come in. Oh, you guys are all so sweet, all of your thank yous. I hope I didn't overload everybody. I tried to parse it out, but this is what people said they wanted with strategies. So thank you for sticking around this long, everyone. Thank you, thank you. Seeing all of these positive thoughts come in just makes my afternoon. Thanks, everyone.